I'd like to welcome Esther Suissa, who is head of the overseas programs at the Ben-Gurion Heritage Institute in Südbürger, Israel. Welcome, Esther, and Sabine Steidle, who holds a PhD and is Museums Education Officer at the Adenauer House Foundation, the Stiftung Bundeskanzler Adenauer House in Rhöndorf, near Bonn in Germany. I'm in Berlin. She studies history and cultural studies. So between them, they're going to tell us about a pragmatic friendship between David BenGurion and Konrad Adenauer, and show an interesting joint virtual tour of the houses of these founders of two states. I mean, I love contrasts and comparisons for getting a perspective on things. And this is a perfect example. Obviously, since the Second World War, the two peoples, the Jewish people and the Germans, have both been involved in making a new and better home for themselves, build back better, you could say. And indeed, the two leaders were friends and worked together to strengthen the ties between the two countries. So I'll hand over to you two. And I hope we'll have time for a little bit, some questions and discussion at the end.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Angus. Thank you very much to all the organizers, to Max, to Ivana, to my colleague Sabine in Germany. My name is Esther. I'm speaking from the Negev Desert in Israel. Thank you to Yael Bamberg, who's from Interpret IL, Israel. And we want to show you something slightly different. We're here to give you a taste of a tour which we arranged thanks to COVID. Because of the COVID crisis, we closed down and we looked for collaborations. And as Angus said, there was a friendship between two unlikely leaders, David BenGurion and Konrad Adenauer. And we said, how can we transmit this this friendship, not by giving a lecture, not by sending people to books, by actually showing their homes. So we're going to show you the two homes of the two leaders, both very different, and we would appreciate questions at the end. And I'll just say that there's a full paper on the site, so we don't need to go into all the biographies of both leaders, and you're very welcome to see the paper, to read the paper. Sabine?
Hello, and thank you again to everybody for making this possible, and for Esther for the idea to meet in a joint virtual tour. My name is Sabine Steidle. I'm here in the original house of Konrad Adenauer, the first federal chancellor of Germany. And I just change the screen to give you a first impression. I'm standing here in the living room of Konrad Adenauer, just that the laptop is mine. It's not original, but everything you see is kept in the original statues of 1967, when Konrad Adenauer died in this house at the age of 91. He lived here for the last 30 years of his life, from 1937 to 1967. Back to you, Esther.
Thank you, Sabine. So whilst Sabine was showing Adenauer's living room, I'm actually showing you the living room of David BenGurion. We're actually in the middle of the desert. Even though you might have seen some green outside, we worked very hard to have some greenery. And Ben-Gurion actually lived here from 1953 to 1973, the last 20 years of his life. He moved here. He collected items from all over the world and was in touch with many leaders. And we actually have a picture of Mahatma Gandhi in his bedroom. I'll show you it very quickly. So we connected to the Gandhi Museum in India. Here is a picture of the bedroom of Mahatma Gandhi. This is his bedroom. Very simple. Many visitors come on a 100,000 visitors But I think this enormous globe, which is disproportionate to the rest of the house, shows how globally David Ben-Gurion felt. And even though he was in the middle of the desert, about 5 hours from Tel Aviv, here you can see him standing with his back to the globe. You could see how well aware he was of world views. And he was very interested, and always, even when he retired, he still wrote. He wrote a lot, and he writes to Adenauer. They actually met in 1960. And in 1966, Konrad Adenauer comes to Steidle, comes to the Negev Desert. And if you look in the full paper, you'll see a famous photograph of them sitting here. So we're here in the library of David Ben-Gurion. David Ben-Gurion was obsessive with books. There are 5,000 books here in this library. And in his second home in Tel Aviv, there are 22,000 books. So it's a person who never finished university studies and learned everything from books. And this is the actual place where they met for the second time. And despite the differences, despite the complex history between both countries, they maintained a friendship. And Sabine sent me letters which both leaders wrote to each other. And Ben-Gurion wrote to Adenauer and thanked him for coming to the kibbutz, because we're here in a kibbutz, and said to him, thank you for making a direct contact with the youth. Young people came, shook his hand, they ate in the communal hall. And that's what we're doing here. We're actually having a direct contact with both leaders through objects, through the atmosphere. Perhaps you'll notice there's a statue of Buddha, there's a statue of Plato, who's very interested in philosophy. And I'll just show you one more before I hand over back to Sabine. You can hear here is actually a statue of Moses, a replica of Michelangelo. And Ben-Gurion always admired. He said the greatest Jew who ever lived was Moses, and had Moses in his library. So we're offering this virtual tour mainly to groups, mainly to school children, students, and adults who want to learn.
Esther, we can't hear you anymore, so I take over. Can I be heard and seen?
We can hear you, yes, Sabine.
Okay, so I just take over for the moment. I went to the next room, which is called Music Room. And just like Esther told you before, even here in Rhöndorf, in Adenauer's house, we find a lot of memories and a lot of presents from other state leaders, memories from travels all over the world. We are in the house of an art lover and also of an religious person. So we have religious items here in the house. I'd like to show you one highlight. This is a cross on a gem given to Adenauer by Pope Paul VI. When he went to the Vatican in Rome. So we have a lot of links and connections between countries and between persons that we can find in the original house of Konrad Adenauer. Our oldest museum object, it's a vase from Cyprus, given to Adenauer by Archbishop Makarios. And as I told you, it is a home of an art lover and music lover. In the living room, we find some other examples for that. I told you that Ben-Gurion has got a lot of books in his library. Also, Adenauer had a lot of books, but they are a little bit disparate all over our foundation, in the library, in other rooms, in the bedroom, in the dining room. We are here in the living room, and we have like a music box. Adenauer loved classical music, And here with this music box, he listened to Haydn, Bach, Mozart. He said some day that he loves Haydn so much, he needs it like a glass of water every day. And he loved nature. Maybe you noticed before that there is a marvelous view over the Rhine Valley. Rhöndorf is a little village near the former capital city of Germany, Bonn, which is in the west of the country at the river Rhine. And we can look all over the Rhine Valley here from Adenauer House. So I hope Esther is back again, and maybe she'd like to tell us something about music and Ben-Gurion. Esther, are you here?
Sorry, I hope you can hear me. What I said when you didn't hear was that one of the issues is with a live session is that there can be technical issues, but we still prefer it over a recorded version because we think there's something about being on live that you're actually here with us. So despite the challenges, we prefer this. And thank you, Sabine, to speak about music. The irony is Ben-Gurion was not a music lover. Ray Charles came here to the kibbutz in 1965 and played for Ben-Gurion, and everyone was so excited that Ray Charles came, and Ben-Gurion was quite apathetic. But I will show you, especially for music lovers, he did have a record player, and when we looked at it, we saw that the record player was actually to
Well, I'm very sorry we can't hear Esther anymore. So once more, I take over and we look around in the living room of Konrad Adenauer. So you got a full impression, at least of this one room. Adenauer loved grandfather clocks. And there are many other artworks and presents that remember us that Adenauer stood for reconciliation and that he had the aim to gain peace again after World War II. And as Federal Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany, he stood for European integration. We have one painting that comes from Spain. Adenauer got it as a present in Spain when he held a famous speech about Europe in 1967. He said, we have to be pragmatic, we have to go on with European integration. And he brought this souvenir from Madrid back home to Rhöndorf. Then have a short look at these two vases. They were presents of Charles de Gaulle, the French president, who was the only person that visited Adenauer as a state leader personally here in Rhöndorf, because this was his private haven. It was not a political place where there were receptions, political receptions, for example. But nevertheless, this was a place where Adenauer made politics and thought about politics. Esther, are you here again?
I am here. Again, apologies. But what I would like to say thank you to Sabine is that so they had they had much in common, but a lot not in common. And you see two very different people and how they connected. And we've learned a lot by our collaboration, and we're looking forward to continued collaboration. And we've already spoken about, especially in terms of sustainability. First of all, a virtual tour is very sustainable because it means you don't have to come here physically or fly here. But even when things become easier, we've spoken about perhaps bringing groups to Adenauer's house, and after doing a tour there, showing a virtual tour of Ben-Gurion's home. So the group can see both houses, one physically and one virtually. So creating a hybrid tour. That's one of our ideas. And we're looking to continued cooperation. So I think we have a few more minutes to perhaps answer questions. I will look on the chat. Perhaps you'd like to tell me if you have any questions, and you're very welcome. My email and Sabine's email is on the program. And for us, things, you know, it's something that which we could have done pre-corona, but it came out as a result of, and it works when people are interested. You know, we tried with the Abraham Lincoln Museum in the United States, because there's a picture of Lincoln, and nothing came out of it. So when there are people on both sides who have a shared interest in making this happen, then it happens. So maybe we'll reply to some questions.
I've got a question to kick off with. How do you two know each other? How did you get together? It was a very innovative, very nice idea, I thought, and it worked even in a simple form like this. So how did your partnership arise?
In March 2020, when we were sitting here and everything was closed, we said, okay, what are we going to do? So we started virtual tours to many communities, especially Jewish communities, but not only. And then we said, why don't we try collaborations? So we wrote to Sabine, we wrote to Gandhi Museum in India, we wrote to the UNU Museum in Myanmar, where we tried. And when we wrote to Adenauer, Sabine immediately wrote back and said, this is a great idea. Then there were issues of Wi-Fi, and you know, we had technical issues. But we started this correspondence, and through these emails, we talked about ideas, and we learned a lot. All our staff had a tour of Adenauer's house virtually, and we did the same, vice versa. And we often are in touch. We work together on the paper to submit the full paper to the conference. And for us, it's opened a new world. Yes. From our side.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating, I mean, it opens very interesting doors for experiencing a place from a distance, not just too parallel, but the idea of, you know, these webcams which you can move. When I'm getting nostalgic about Scotland, I visit some webcams, and some of them you can actually move or zoom in and out. And I wonder if there'll be one day when places like yours will be full of little buzzing drones of people who are buzzing from room to room and trying not to crash into each other's drones or something like that.
Right.
Because obviously you can't be there to carry a camera around for the hundreds or thousands of visitors who are interested in the place. But another question. In architecture, we're often faced with the question of personality and architecture. A great country house will be attacked because it was built or paid for by money from slavery, for example. And as an architect, I'd say, well, let's just talk about the architect. We don't have to talk so much about who paid for it. But I would say that. Do you think, I mean, how much can you actually learn about personalities by the interior design? I've noticed that Ben-Gurion had a very Spartan touch, whereas right. Adenauer rather more comfortable. Is this important to know?
Sabine, would you like to?
Yes, it's very important because everything in this house tells a story about Konrad Adenauer, and all the furnishings, the things that surrounded him in his everyday life tell something about his personality.
Yeah.
This house was constructed in 1937 when Adenauer was persecuted by the National Socialists. Nevertheless, he could construct a home for himself and his big family. He got a rent from the city of Cologne before he had been Lord Mayor of this metropolis in the West. And he could take his furnishings from Cologne to Rhöndorf. Yeah. Also, he was not allowed to do politics, to have his profession, but he could have his things with him. And there are a lot of memories to his time in Cologne. And furthermore, Adenauer was very, very interested in his direct surroundings. He had a deep impact on the architecture. The architecture was his son-in-law, no, his brother-in-law, I'm sorry. And he was always sketching, drawing. He thought about the architecture, about the furnishings. So this is really a home of Konrad Adenauer where he expressed himself.
Yes, Esther?
And I can just say that Ben-Gurion is very different. The only thing he asked when he moved to the kibbutz in 1953 was a place for his library. Otherwise, he had no interest. When we do the proper tour, he had 3 suits. He was not interested in any other material possessions, but he knew that people would come here. He knew this would have a historical relevance, and he donates the home to the state of Israel when in his will. I can just give you another example. The curtains behind me are actually not the original curtains, but they're based on a photograph where he's sitting with his wife Paula, who's also very important here. And we took the photograph of the curtains because the curtains had withered away after 45, nearly 50 years since his death. And we went to the major fashion college in Israel and said, please, could you reconstruct the same design? And we took this and they created the same design in order to try and make it as authentic as possible. The flooring, but your analysis was correct. It's very Spartan, very little interest in home comforts, but a large library. I just want to answer one. I think there was a question by Michael who asked about their religious, whether they were religious or secular. I'll just say about Ben-Gurion, he grew up in Eastern Europe, in Plonsk, in Poland, and came to live in then Israel before the creation in 1906 at the age of 20. He grew up religious, but he at the age of 15, he decided to be non-religious, and he was a very secular Jew. However, he was the one who maintained that the character of the state of Israel would be religious. So the law is religious. If people want to get married or when people die or birth, everything is according to Jewish law, even though he himself was completely secular. He didn't fast on the most important fast day of the Jewish year. He was not religious, but he was very well versed in the Bible. For him, the Old Testament, and to an extent the New Testament, was very important to him. So he knew his Bible, but he was not a practicing or an Orthodox Jew.
How about Konrad Adenauer, Sabine?
Konrad Adenauer was a practicing Catholic, and you can see this in his house too. Religion was very a matter of course to him. And for example, from here you can see the local church where Adenauer went every Sunday. So this was part of his everyday life. And inside the house, I just like to show you here in this room, we have religious art, but we also have religious, words for everyday life. So he was a very religious person, and it played a big role for him, for his life, but not for his politics. Of course, he was the co-founder of a Christian party, the CDU, the Christian Democratic Union, but he did not support the politics for the Vatican, for example. So he was very pragmatic. And I'd like to add one thing. Adenauer had a close link to Jewish life as well. As Lord Mayor of Cologne, he supported the local temple, the Jewish temple, and he had a lot of Jewish friends in Cologne. And after World War II, he tried to help to reconstruct Jewish life in Germany.
Should we be talking about their wives? Were they married?
Sabine.
Adenauer was married twice. He had He met his first wife in Cologne in 1902. She came from a wealthy and influential family in Cologne. Emma was her name. They had 3 kids together, and tragically, she died in 1916 at the age of 36. So he was a widower when he became Lord Mayor of Cologne. And 3 years later, in 1919, he married his second wife, Gussi, Auguste Zinse. She was the daughter of his neighbors. And she was not Catholic, which was a problem at that time, but she converted to Catholicism. And they had 4 children together. So all in all, they had 7 children. But Gussi, again, tragically died very young, in her 50s, shortly after the war in 1948. So when Adenauer became chancellor, he was a widower, and his daughters, his youngest daughters, accompanied him on his travels like first ladies.
Okay. So 2 bachelor pads, really.
I'll just say very quickly, because I know that we have to end, that Ben-Gurion was married to Paula, who we met in New York in 1917. Yes. She was an atheistic, she was Jewish, but had very little connection to her Judaism. They were married, and she passed away in 1968. Oh. So she moved here with him. Right. And they had 2 separate bedrooms. So right. It's always an interest when people come and they see the different bedrooms. I think it's the same in Adenauer's home. But I think in general, we can say the fact that they became together because of the Reparations Agreement, the famous Reparations Agreement between West Germany and Israel. We've here to show like a different spotlight on the friendship through this virtual tour.
I find maybe it's reading too much into it, but by looking at the very functional, rather Spartan quality of the Gurion house, that it reflects the youth of the country, you know, starting from nothing basically in the desert and building up almost a pioneer life. Whereas the Adenauer house, you can see that there's centuries of heritage still there, still intact, and a basis which Israel at that point simply couldn't afford and didn't possess. And it would be nice to see the present day leaders of Germany and Israel and compare their homes now, maybe for another tour.
Well, we don't know yet who will be.
So. Well, we don't know, do we? It would be nice also, we got a few minutes.
So can I just mention, sorry, can I just to what you said, it's very true. And Ben-Gurion came to the desert as a personal example. He wanted the youth to follow him. And the irony was that they didn't. Most Israelis, even today, prefer to live in the center of the country, in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, in the big cities. And he came to serve as an example. But less than 10% of the population live in the Negev desert, which is 60% of the whole country. So in one way you could say that he failed. His personal example didn't work. Yes. But we still maintain, and exactly what it was a pioneering move. That's correct. Very, very spot on.
Yeah. Have either of you thought about installing some audios or some hidden loudspeakers or something in the house? I'm interested in how houses sound and how they smell and how they look, of course. To have the voices of these people hidden in the background, surprisingly from the office or wherever, or are you just keeping it exactly as it was without any schnick-schnack?
So we have to keep it like it is. Every change in the house has to be registered with the offices, so it's not allowed to change anything. Okay. But of course, there are a lot of smells and audios that are original. There are the grandfather clocks, and there is the smell of the 1950s and 1960s. So at the moment, temporarily, the house is closed to visitors because of COVID-19, because it's quite narrow and we can't keep the distances. But if visitors come here, they say, oh, it smells like in my grandfather's house. So you can really smell and feel the original flair of the house.
Very similar to us. Very similar to us. It's true. It's very hard to portray sounds and smells. We do have in the kitchen a blender where Paula would make him a smoothie, a shake every day. So sometimes we send the recipe and we say, you know, try it at home. And this is what Ben-Gurion drank every day in order to stay healthy. But you're right, there are limitations, but we try and bring people in so that you feel that you're actually here as much as possible.
Yes, great. Well, we run out of time, so thank you very much, Esther and Sabine. Very nice idea, very original, and I think we all appreciated your virtual tours there.